Hiya, so this video is really for anybody who is studying the CAS Study of Poetry 1900s to Present, Heaney and Frost Anthology, and this is Seamus Heaney's The Peninsula. So if you think about what theme this could possibly fall under, it could be the creative process, nature, or journeys. And what I really like about this poem is the fact that Heaney sees a physical journey as a standing point of a linguistic journey. By immersing himself in his experiences of the natural world, he gains clarity, inspiration, and a renewed appreciation of nature. So, contextually, this poem was written about a drive to the Ards Peninsula in County Down and conveys a clear love for the Irish landscape, which is obviously prevalent in quite a lot of Seamus Heaney's work. There's a reference to the Irish countryside, which stimulated Heaney's mind and inspired him to write quite a lot of his poetry. As you know, Heaney is considered a poet of the people, and he's really accessible, and part of that love that people have for Heaney really stemmed from the way he paints these beautiful rural environments and uses them to inspire his poetry. If we look at the title, The Peninsula, it hints that obviously this is going to be based on his visit to the peninsula, so it's a very simple title, but with some very complicated undertones that become really obvious when you're finished reading the poem. So it's a poem which encourages the reader to seek inspiration from somewhere, a poem about how to live, how to express yourself. The landscape can restore your ability to really see the world when it seems that there is nothing more to say, and it can bring you out of inarticulacy. The atmosphere throughout the entire poem, when you begin reading it, becomes apparent that it is serene, peaceful, and tranquil. It is straightforward, it's an uncomplicated moment with simple, direct language, as is very common for most of Heaney's work. It's appropriate that it starts with when you have nothing more to say, just drive, as the poem is obviously based on the search for articulacy, search for words and being able to express yourself, and yet it opens with the concept of inarticulacy. If we look at the very first line in stanza 1, it encourages the reader to seek inspiration through that direct address, that you, actually pinpointing and engaging the reader. Nothing more to say, and that's really important again because it's pointing out that he's looking for creative inspiration, and when feeling drained or quiet, this is something that he likes to do. It's also really important that we have this imperative command here, just drive. A simple break from frustrations, a drive for the sake of a journey, something carefree, really helps Heaney in his creative process. This is a really encouraging tone, it's conversational through that direct address to the reader, and it shows that this situation is a relatable one. Really, who hasn't been in that scenario where you don't know what else to say? Then we can see for a day all round the peninsula. And this is really interesting because some versions actually have this as around the peninsula, and in that case you'd have your alliteration. My version actually has the around, so I'm going to point out the alliteration that isn't available on screen. It stresses that a journey around the peninsula offers him limitless possibilities. You'll notice that there's enjambment the whole way throughout all 4 stanzas, conveying a sense of repressing a journey, which again is really interesting considering what the subject matter is actually about. Then we have this really beautiful image. The sky is high as over a runway. Again, in my version it says tall, but that doesn't really matter because you've got this beautiful simile. You've got the airport imagery, the idea of flying off and escaping to limitless possibilities again. So that's a really interesting, poignant image there. The simile emphasises the vastness of nature and also suggests that it's a very distant or removed concept as well sometimes, that people must throw themselves into a natural landscape to be removed from other things, that you actually have to hunt this out, and that going and escaping into nature really clears your mind, that when you're alone, or to be alone, you need to go on some sort of peaceful journey. Then we have this, the land without marks, so you will not arrive. That's really interesting. Again, mine has some caesura in there in the form of a comma. You can see that this land without marks is a really picturesque, peaceful, tranquil image, and the speaker is still unable to articulate himself at this point in the poem. If you look at this final line in stanza 1 and the next line in stanza 2, you can see that metaphorically the speaker will not be able to mark the land with his words, yet inspiration comes through experience and reflection as through his passing through. So when he passes through, you can see that the landscape is part of the journey to inspiration, but it is not the end destination in itself. He's driving with no destination in mind as a form of release, which is different from the chaotic travel of the modern world. And that always skirting the landfall, again, he's not able to mark it. He's just always on the outskirts, always skirting. Not really part of, but again, removed and purely going there for inspiration. Then if we look at dusk horizons drink down sea and hill, you've got your dusk, drink, down. So you've got your alliteration there. There's also, if you look at the U's and all the O's and I's, you've also got your assonance there as well. And this brings the place to life and reminds us that this is a place of constant change and movement where nothing has a chance to grow stark or dismal, reinforcing that it's a place of endless or limitless sources for inspiration. It captures the pace and the pitch of life on the peninsula, this slow, calm pace of life. Again, as shown through the repeated use of caesura, as we can see throughout that. The ploughed field swallows the whitewashed gable. Again, that reinforces the concept of it being this beautiful place filled with inspiration. You've got swallow, so you've got that beautiful personification there, and then you've got the adjective whitewashed gable. So the adjectives throughout this actually give life to the rugged beauty of the peninsula, and help us picture it. So some beautiful visual imagery prevalent throughout the poem, and obviously you've got more enjambment as well throughout. You're in the dark again, and again he directly addresses the reader yet again. Dark again, so he still hasn't found that articulacy. So the day turns to night and darkness, but underneath that really basic, obvious level, there's a metaphor for the gloom before the journey that the speaker was feeling, or that he suggests you possibly feel. As beforehand, the narrator was struggling for anything meaningful to say. Then you've got, again, another imperative, which is very similar to the just drive. You've got now recall, and you've got that enjambment as the sentence continues on to the next stanza. So the imperative jogs the idea of, recalls the idea of jogging a memory. Beauty is so vivid and inspiring that the memory of it will sustain you even when you can't see it anymore. So even after you've left the beautiful peninsula, even recalling the memory of it is enough to really restore you. If we look at stanza 3, we can see that without expression or without inspiration, there is nothing to comment on. And Heaney's vivid depictions of nature throughout stanza 2 and 3 focus on the more detailed, unique features of the land. So you've got the glazed foreshore, and again, you've got those beautiful adjectives that help you picture this fantastic rural landscape. The silhouetted log, and again, your adjectives are so important here in creating vivid visual imagery. So the metaphor of the glazed foreshore vividly evokes the light on the shore, giving off a sense of permanence to the beauty, and the word choice also suggests that it is painted a perfect idyllic beauty of the water reflected off the beach. And again, it's a metaphor for that happiness that you get from visiting nature, and it contrasts or is juxtaposed to the darkness in stanza 2. Silhouetted log, so you can make out the minute details like the outline of a log, and again you can imagine just how rich in vivid imagery this is. You can almost picture it. And then that rock where breakers shredded into rags, so that's really interesting as well, because you've got the breakers shredded into rags, and breakers are heavy waves that break into white foam on the shore. So again, beautiful imagery of this natural world and how profound and inspiring it really can be. Then you've got the leggy birds, and look at that really simplistic vocabulary he's using there. That really simple adjective to create the vivid visual imagery. Leggy birds stilted on their own legs. It's a playful image of the birds balancing, and you can see that there's a metaphor here of the mysterious, playful description of the land floating in the water, conveying the idea of finding inspiration by allowing yourself to be immersed in the natural world. You've got islands riding themselves out into the fog. Then you've got this really interesting, in mine you don't have it, but in mine there's a full stop after fog, and that caesura is really important, signalling the end of the journey and the end of the enjambment between stanzas. If you look at the very final stanza, stanza 4, and then the drive back home, still with nothing to say. There's the imperative, drive back home, still with nothing to say. So imperative becomes really important throughout this poem. Grounding yourself in the natural world, and by doing that you'll be able to be better equipped with coping with life. So you can see how stanzas 1, 2 and 3 have all really helped with the poet's progression in 4. Still with nothing to say. So again, it doesn't mean that as soon as you leave you'll become articulate and have that quench, or have that thirst really quenched, should I say. However, you will eventually get some sort of expression out of your experience. Uncode all the landscapes really emphasises this expression, and again contrasts or is juxtaposed with the nothing to say, emphasising the experiences and gives expression to them after being inspired. So you may have to wait a while, but eventually your trip away, your trip in solitude to this beautiful natural place will be helpful. The inspired observer or wordsmith may realise the beauty of the natural sights through the written word. It's also really interesting to note here that there is in fact a couplet, landscapes and shapes. So a rhyming couplet in the middle of that, which will become important later when we talk about form and structure and the rhyme scheme. Anyway, we have by this, and again look at that beautiful caesura there through that colon. The poem ends where it started. Just as the journey around the peninsula did, the journey is the key to unlocking and allowing himself to express himself in richer language than the simple language that we saw in stanza 1. You can see founded, extremity, a much more complex use of vocabulary there. He really stresses water and ground in their extremity, and this really emphasises how seeing things at the height of their beauty can inspire you to do almost anything. So it's again got kind of like a restorative power of nature. Here, he's not really writing a poem about how to write, so it doesn't really fit into the creative process that way. It's how to live and how to express yourself, and through Heaney sometimes that is the power of the written word. Then if we look at the rhyme, it's inconsistent. It changes in stanzas 1, 2 and 3. Lines 1 and 6 rhyme, representing the distance between the speaker and his distraction or inspiration, but often returns from the poetry in stanza 4, and he moves at it, represented by the couplet in the middle of the stanza. So you can see that this distance between distraction and inspiration have come full circle in a way, and he's finally got that inspiration. The landscapes and shapes really emphasize that. The structure, so you've got 4 quatrains, aka 4 4-line stanzas, representing the 4 different stages of the journey, a step-by-step guide to finding motivation. And this is reinforced by the use of metaphor throughout the poem. So number 1, stanza 1, is the beginning of the journey. Stanza 2, the details of the unique features of the land. 3 is all about reflection, and you can see a reflective tone as well. And number 4 is the return, the embrace of the experiences and letting them actually affect you or have some sort of impact on you as well. Hopefully this was useful. Again, as I've said in previous videos, there are tons of other videos for both Robert Frost and Seamus Heaney. So if you're studying that spec and you want a really loose, really brief understanding of the poems, then you should look at those other videos. But again, I'm sure your teacher will be solidifying and consolidating this in class and really building on this anyway.